Then they introduced this concept of the future self. Think about yourself 10 or 20 years from now. And they noticed that what our brains do then is think of us. It was very similar when we think about strangers.
Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast, Money Healers. I'm your host, Rachel Duncan. I'm a financial therapist and art therapist, and I founded the Money Healing Club. You've come to the softest place to land in personal finance, where we talk about all the things we don't usually say when we talk about money. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. For help with your particular situation, please seek help from a licensed mental health, tax, legal, or finance professional. Okay, today I want to ask you, what happens when the thing you've been working toward, your working life, that's retirement, suddenly feels more terrifying than exciting? You might envision, retirement is just going to be all relaxing, but really when it comes down to it, there's some big psychological shifts that need to happen as you shift into retirement. So we spend decades in what's called, quote, the accumulation phase, which is saving, working, contributing to 401ks or other retirement plans. And maybe, hopefully, watching that number steadily grow, and you keep your hands off it, right? Try not to spend it. Don't pull from it. But then suddenly we retire. We're supposed to flip a switch and become comfortable with spending it down. We're supposed to go from don't touch that money to this pile of money needs to last you the rest of your life. And not all retirement is that cut and dry, but if we were to back up, that's sort of the goal. Today I'm talking with John Hankins. And he's the perfect person to help us unpack this idea of the psychology of retirement. John is a licensed clinical social worker, and he's a certified financial therapist who specializes in working with people navigating the psychological complexities of retirement. But here's what makes him uniquely qualified, is he's not just studying this stuff, he's living it. He's 73, and he reinvented himself as a financial therapist after 35 years of a career in IT. So he's experiencing firsthand what it means to shift from that accumulation to what he calls the de-accumulation phase. In our conversation, we dig into the anxiety that can come up with managing a larger pile of money than you've ever had to manage before, that you weren't allowing yourself to touch, and the identity crisis of, well, who am I if I'm not working? Who am I if I don't have a career? And all those complicated family dynamics that come up when adult children are struggling financially while their retired parents are sitting on retirement savings. So whether you're decades away from retirement or right in the thick of it, this conversation is going to give you language for the tricky emotions that you may not know how to name. If you're supporting aging parents or wondering how your own retirement story might unfold, John offers us both professional insight and the wisdom that comes with walking this path himself. If this is a conversation that you'd like to take further as you become better friends with your future self, you are warmly invited to join me and other money healers in the Money Healing Club itself. It's a monthly financial therapy membership and learning space and support group for you if you're on the journey of learning about money. And we talk about the big ideas to the nuts and bolts. It's where I spend most of my time, and it is absolutely the most affordable and comprehensive way to heal your relationship with money. And just by using code PODCAST at checkout, you'll get half off your first month. So join me and other money healers at moneyhealingclub.com/club. So let's dive in to what we don't usually say when we talk about retirement with John Hankins. All right, John, I'm just going to jump right in and ask you, from your point of view as a financial therapist, what aspects of retirement are we not really talking about when we talk about retirement?
I think that the biggest issue that I've observed, and this is both in clients as well as family and friends, is the anxiety that is part of being in what I call the 401k generation versus the pension generation, the defined contribution versus the defined benefit, that you work for however, 30 years, let's say, and you're contributing and you have a match and you're doing all these things right. And here you are, you get ready and you retire. And now you are handed this task of, here's a pile of money. And I think an interesting thing about the pile of money is that it is a far larger pile of money than you have ever managed in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's
That,
this.
and I'll add that you have not let yourself touch for that long. Like that's why it's a large pile of money, is because
Exactly. Yeah.
you have kind of blocked it out from your cash flow, and then suddenly it's part of your cash flow.
Exactly. Yeah. And in a complicated way. And I think that that's
Mm.
part of the whole picture, is that you now have this, significant pile of money. It is tied up in some very complex ways in terms of the right way to withdraw it versus the wrong way to withdraw it. And oh, by the way, you need to make it last you for the rest of your life. So, you know, well, how long is that? Well, here's an
Depends.
actuarial table.
And
So
the answer is we don't know, right? And it's
yeah,
that
it's a total unknown. Um, I think there's another intergenerational layer on this, and that is kind of a guilt piece of like, okay, now I've got this pile of money, and here's my 30-year-old, and they're really struggling, and shouldn't I, since I have access to all this money, take that out and help my my child? um, at this point. It puts you, I think, in a totally different perspective from when you're working. It's like I'm working hard, I'm making ends meet. I'm not wealthy, and I'm putting money in. I've been doing this for 20 or 30 years. It's this thing that's totally ignored's not the right word, but totally off limits. Okay, I retire. Hey, I've got $1 million in my 401k. All right. Here's, my kid wants to buy a house. They can't afford a down payment. I've got $1 million. How can I not help them? Well,
Mhm.
uh, I just think that's another layer and a really complicated question. So when we said that $1 million, it's got to last you the rest of your life.
Also, $1 million arbitrarily. And I think
Yeah.
that's such an important also anchor point. It's like in some ways that's a lot of money. In some ways it's not a lot of
Yeah.
money for retirement, right? It's this interesting sort of magical figure that I think is out there. And John, I do want to back up a little bit because you talked about like the 401k generation versus the pension generation. I'm wondering, is there a third generation here of people who have been part of like the gig economy, who have not been doing the
Oh,
kind of work that has 401k? Like, I'm even wonder, just backing up a little bit,
yeah.
especially with the folks that I do a lot of work with, right? Or maybe the IRA generation who have had to do it much more on their own. I
Well,
wonder what
yeah.
you.
And I think that um, is an even bigger challenge. Uh, I've dealt with a number of people where, yeah, they really have to figure out how they're going to make it, and they're doing that at say 60, 65, or 70. Cognitively, they're in good shape. They're actually able to work, so they're able to keep earning money to support themselves day to day, and they have a small nest egg. And yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that one at all.
Right. Probably in 20, 30 years, we're going to see this generation who didn't have
Yeah,
the 401ks, that where it wasn't really managed for
yeah,
them or no matches and they had to do it on their
yeah.
own. I think it's going to, that'll be the next generation, John, on financial
Well,
affairs,
I
helping these
think
other folks.
we're already seeing some of that now, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, when you just look at the average savings that um, the typical 60-year-old has right now, I mean, it's not impressive,
Yeah.
at
And
at all.
do you have any figures about like what is the average? I mean, we're talking also in the US here.
I think they're talking like $300,000 is the. I mean, I think there's a big difference between the mean and the median there. But yeah, you're talking six figures. You're not talking seven figures.
And I think the bucket of cold water here is, in order to retire, in order to support yourself, leaving Social Security on the side, is that the goal really is something like seven figures. I think that someone in their
Oh,
30s and 40s, that's really hard to wrap their heads around. But now I'm not as much on the planning side as you are, but I do talk about like your biggest asset is time, right? A lot of that growth, it just comes from the time, not so much how much you put into it. I mean, you got to put some seeds in the ground for there to be a garden, but it is the length of time for that garden to really establish itself. That's where most of the gains would come from when you try to grow your your retirement account into a place where you could actually draw from it for the final chapter of your life, for like that last third of your life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to say, I was really fortunate that um, I was in a job when I was 35 that forced me to contribute.
Me too.
Yeah. I started working for that organization. I think I was 33. And they were like, well, how much do you want to put into this? And I was like, nothing. I'm trying to pay off my student loans and I've got a kid and, these different things. And it was like 35 and it's like, oh, here. And I had one of my coworkers who was in his late 50s took me aside and explained to me. He really did me a big favor and said, here, you're forced to do this. You need to do this. And here's a way to approach it. So that,
I had a
and
similar story, John. I was, 28, 29, and I was doing operations for a small construction company, and it was owned by two owners. And they said, hey, let's, they were kind of doing a SEP plan for themselves. But like, no, let's do a real 401k for everyone. So we had 8 employees. And they're like, Rachel, set that up. I was like, oh, so like
oh,
here I
wow.
am, 28, never thought about retirement account. So it was part of my job to figure this out for the company. So it was this great crash course in 401k. So we got it set up. And that was in 2007. And then 2008 hit.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is when all my contributions went in 2008 at the crash. So just to back up, it was a really lucky time to
Mm.
begin my 401k. And the company had a generous match and would do kind of like bonuses directly into our 401k. And so it was kind of rocket fuel. It was also a scary time. I was like, wait, what? And my bosses were like, yeah, let's do it. Like fund it now, right? When like Lehman Brothers is collapsing. But
Yeah.
because exactly, they're of that age, they were in their 50s. They're like, yeah, now's the time. And I'm so grateful for having been on kind of the business side of that, seeing that how that benefited the business and the owners and really teaching the employees about it. And I was like, oh, I mean, there's some setup here, but it's really not that scary. And the added benefit of it being pulled out directly from your paycheck, it is a huge benefit as opposed to, it's a different hill to climb when you're self-employed or you work for a place that doesn't offer 401k is to automate it yourself. And that is something that I would really advocate is to, everyone can set up an IRA and that's your own 401k, right? And that you'd be automating it yourself out of the earnings that you have. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it is, and you being an artistic type, is, really that whole type of up and down income and in directly for services is really a big challenge and just in paying your taxes and then saving for retirement on top of that. It's a real challenge and it's
Yeah.
complicated for sure.
And something I talk with my clients a lot who are self-employed is when you think of your rate, right? Your retirement has got to be a slice of that
Mm.
rate. If you are charging $150 for something, $15 of that should go towards retirement. And that is kind of like, oh, wow, then maybe I should be charging 200, like it starts to
Yeah.
make a little more sense for the long term to, do meaningful work and to charge a rate that you're able to save with.
Yeah.
And it really does underline that. Okay. We did a little detour, but I do want to
Yeah.
back up to it sounds like the kind of folks that you typically work with are of the 401k generation. They've had a lifetime of careers, maybe in different places, and they are pretty much relying on this pot of money in their 401k that they've been contributing to from their
Mm.
paychecks. It's been sort of automatically reinvested. They haven't let themselves draw from it or very little. And then here they are at, in their mid 60s. And like, oh, can I retire is maybe a first question. Or I'm just curious, like someone comes to you and like, how does the conversation start? Especially because you have more of a psychological perspective than
Mm.
just the technical stuff. And I know
Mm.
you do carry both of those, but how does that conversation start with somebody who's like, can I retire?
Well, yeah, I wish there was a single conversation, but it's always different. I get it from both the what am I going to do when I retire? I can retire. I've got the money. What am I going to do? I hate the idea of retiring. I think I'm going to be completely at sea, basically.
What
So
am
it
I going to
becomes,
do if I'm not a
yeah,
worker?
yeah, who am I?
Am
What
I?
is my identity?
Yeah.
Is a very deep question for a surprising number of people. both men and women. So that is, exploration into one area. The other side is, yeah, can I retire? And I
Mhm.
think this goes back to like just very fundamental, all the issues that you deal with. To me, the number one issue is, okay, how much are you spending? How much money do you need? Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
And that becomes, I'm just surprised at the number of people where there is an obvious emotional block to really digging into that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll do spreadsheets for people. I try to give them tools. I try to nudge them along, and the buried resistance there of like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I really want to do that, but I couldn't do that, and I can't do that this month. But I'm going to work on that next month. Um,
And John,
and
I
I,
caught you. I caught you not wanting to say resistant because there's this thing in the therapist community. We don't say resistant client anymore, but like,
yeah,
right, because it's like, okay, there's a reason why, right? That there is
yeah,
some kind of block there. And it's maybe because up until this point, hey, they've been working, they've had a steady paycheck, they haven't had to watch it. And now it's like they've said, oh, I'm going to be able to retire and do what I want. And then they meet someone like John and like, well, yes, however, to really understand how you're going to retire, we got to know what your life costs. And if someone has spent, most of their adult life not having to pay much attention to that, that is a huge change for them. And they're going to kick that can down the road. And I can understand that, especially having that transparent with someone on the other side, right? To show it with you.
yeah.
That's a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, I think, vulnerability is the right word, because I think that the fear in that is, oh, you're going to put me on a budget. You're going to tell me that I'm spending too much at Starbucks. And I try to emphasize, I don't care how you're spending your money. Let's just get our arms around how much is it? You know, what
Yeah.
what are you spending per month? Let's just start there. It may be, hey, this is great. You're going to have enough. If this is your lifestyle, you know, if $10,000 a month is your lifestyle, and that could be fine. You've got money and then some to support that. Or no, maybe you need to think about some things. Um, there's also a lot of people miss the kind of technical aspects of moving from the accumulation phase to the withdrawal phase, because they look at
Mm.
their paycheck and say, okay, here's how much money I have. Well, yeah. And you were really cranking on saving money, putting your maximum amount into your 401k, saving for your retirement. Well, now you're retired. You don't have to do that saving anymore. Okay. So there's really understanding those pieces is needs to be disassembled to some degree, but just
Mhm.
getting people to feel comfortable with looking at the numbers can
Mm.
be, uh, in some cases, a real uphill battle.
And that isn't that just the basis of the work?
Uh,
It's simply getting comfortable with the numbers when there's financial trauma, there's a whole lifetime of, baggage and maybe conflict and even childhood stuff. Even someone who's in their 60s looking at retirement, if
oh,
they haven't processed some childhood stuff, that is going to come out right now, isn't it?
yeah, I have a client who, right now, who would be in any measure would be considered a high net worth client, who is in his late 50s. He's hired me to help him get ready for retirement. And um, he's a wonderful guy. But the baggage that he is carrying is making it so hard for him to accept that he has been successful,
Mm-hmm.
and that he is in fact, I told him this the other day. I said, you're set for retirement. And he said, I can't accept that.
I can't
I just
accept
can't
that.
accept it.
Right. It's
Um,
such a different way of being, like you said, like accumulation phase to withdrawal phase. That's a real 180. Although I do want to say, like, I think for some folks, and this it will probably change as generations age, there might not be such a black and white, right? Where people will work part time
Mm.
and it not be such a clear cut. I mean, certainly for some people it
Yeah.
is, and I know some folks like that, but I think for a lot of folks also, it isn't going to be, I turned 65, then stop working and I just
Yeah.
retire. That's also going to shift a little bit as well. Do you think, or do you
Well,
see that where maybe it's not as clear cut?
yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a couple different components there, and one is just our longevity that we, especially in my generation, okay, baby boomers, our model is, yeah, dad retired and he lived for another 10 years.
Mm.
Um, you retired at 65 and you make it to 75, maybe 80. I mean, my father lived till he was 95. My mother-in-law lived till she was 101.
Oh, wow.
So this was
But
just
that's
sort of the
unusual.
harbinger. Yeah, just the
Yeah.
harbinger of, and the guy that I work with, he plots, his plan includes, here actuarially, based on your health, your parents, all that sort of stuff. Here's what we think your life expectancy is: 102.
Wow.
For my
Oh,
wife,
right, John.
it's like 98 though. Um,
You're a good
so,
stock, John. I'm glad to hear it.
but I don't think it's that. I think that more and more people are seeing that, and I think at the same time, there's also that we are much healthier. We're not as worn out when we get
Yeah.
to this point. So uh, the idea of continuing to keep working is, well, there's multiple ways to look at that. Um, and again, back to, can I retire? The statement might be like, well, and back to, your time is your friend here, right? Okay, so I've got this money in my 401k. If I could, and I'm 65, and if I can put off withdrawing, letting that accumulate. So you look like two ways: let that accumulate and defer Social Security until I'm 70. But maybe I have some other savings. There's some other ways that we can look at this. But maybe I can go to a part-time job. Something where I'm able to cover my cost of living, but let this money accumulate a little longer, so that when I hit 70, then I'm in, I've like taken a kind of a significant leap in some ways in terms of what I'm projected as far as my nest egg is going to be. So I think that our capability is to continue working is important. And I think it also comes into play in the other piece, in the who am I? What am I doing? I mean, for me, you know, I'm doing this because I want to do it. I want to be
This is
doing
your
something.
everyone.
Yeah,
This is John's retirement right now.
yeah. I mean, I'm 73 years old.
You are.
Yeah.
You're
So,
looking good, John.
and my plan, I had a client a couple of months ago who, I am helping him manage. He's in his 50s. I'm helping him manage his business. And he said, well, I'm a little concerned because here you're doing this stuff, and then you're not going to be doing this. Maybe you're deciding next year. And I thought about it. I said, I want to do this for the next 10 years.
Oh,
I don't see any reason to stop. And in fact, I
yeah.
see every reason to keep going, because we know that these kind of activities are, what keep us healthy.
Yeah, that
So,
meaning making
yeah.
and the stuff that you and I do, it's just so imbued with meaning that it keeps me going. Absolutely. I'll work for a long time too. And also I'm just a worker. I love working, but I mean I'd love to work less, I guess. But I don't see me going to from 100 to 0 when I'm
Yeah.
65 at all. I definitely get that. Okay, so something we had talked about previously is the concept of future self. And how do you, well, first tell us what the concept of future self is and where you get this idea and how you bring that into your work with your clients.
Okay, so there's this guy, his name is Hal Hirschfield, who has been working on this idea. He's a psychologist at UCLA. He's been working at this for the past 20 years, and um, he started. This is very interesting. He was doing work looking at, and he's using a functional MRI. So he's looking at, this is like brain scan type stuff. And They were doing MRIs, and they were getting people to think about looking at pictures of friends and family, and then looking at pictures of strangers. And they were looking at the differences, what was happening in their brain when they were looking at people close to them and people that they would consider, kind of unknown, distant people. Then they introduced this concept of the future self. Think about yourself 10 or 20 years from now. And they noticed that what our brains do then is think of us. It was very similar when we think about strangers, that we viewed our future selves as strangers. And so he started off on this road to, okay, what can we do to improve our relationship with our future self? And he specifically works very much in the area of retirement savings, getting people to save for retirement. And so, for instance, he did an experiment where he had people wearing, virtual reality goggles, and they were in an environment where there was a mirror. And when they looked in the mirror, what they saw was an aged version of themselves. Okay. So they found that when they introduced this whole idea of seeing an aged version of yourself, and then gave them decisions around saving, that the people that had seen the aged version of themselves were much more likely to elect for higher savings rates.
Gotcha.
And
Because
they,
it's sort of like, that's a real person that I know.
yeah,
That's not a
yeah,
stranger anymore.
yeah. I think for me, and the way that I use this is just to introduce the concept that it's, I mean, let's face it, we live in a world where, and especially as therapists, we talk a lot about the past. Okay.
We do. We
Um,
do.
we only have the present moment to do anything,
Yeah.
right? Okay. I mean, that's just a kind of an
That's all we
existential
got.
fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything that we're doing, the only thing that it's going to affect is the future. We're not going to ever change the past.
Yeah.
So I think it's this interesting continuum. And when you introduce the idea of the future self, this is you. Think about you, create this entity. It's just a novel concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
Create an entity that's you 20 years from now. Think about that.
Yeah.
Who do you want that person to be? I think it just makes it more concrete in some interesting ways versus a kind of, you think about the sort of tasks or environment, or kind of things. Okay, yeah, I want to have a really cool car 10 years from now. Well, no, think about you, not the car. Think about you being the person in the car, driving the car,
Mm-hmm.
and what that means. I've just found it kind of a touchstone in a way of,
Mm-hmm.
like, people have said to me, "Oh yeah, I need to take care." That's right. We talked about the future self thing. I need to take care of my future self. See, I'm doing
Yeah.
this. I'm doing some future self stuff. So and he's done lots of different. This guy he's a prolific researcher and publisher. So he's got just tons of stuff that's really just inspired me to think about that whole perspective. I think it's interesting, just very briefly, that I do think, well, and this comes from me personally, when you think about, use this concept of the future self, that I think as you age, we have this kind of slope where when you're 30, thinking about the future self, everything is, capacity wise, your ability to do things is continuing to grow. But I think when you're
Mm-hmm.
60 or 70, and you think about the future self, I mean, I have a very positive vision of my own future self, but it's also within the context of, there's just some stuff that I will have less capacity to do. I mean, I'm a very
Right.
passionate bicyclist, but I look at, there's, I'm not going to be able to do a 50-mile ride. You know, I can
Right.
do a 20-mile ride, but the idea I should sign up next summer for a 50-mile ride, really not a good idea.
I
It's
think that's interesting. Actually, when you were describing Hal Hirschfield's work, it reminded me, I have a feeling he was on maybe a bigger podcast a little while back, because a club member told us that she had heard about this. and she did an AI generated version of her picture,
Mm. Oh, yeah,
aged
yeah.
10 or 20 years, and she printed it out and framed it and put it on her
Oh,
desk
wow. Okay.
so that she really felt like I'm doing this for her. And it really helped her even just do micro savings every day. I'm
Mm.
doing this for her. And in art therapy, we talk a lot about making the implicit explicit, right? And that's exactly what this is. Like all of
Mm.
these exercises, like, oh, sure, I know that I'm going to be old someday, but it's not real. It's kind of out here. And to really make it explicit, whether it's through image making or like an AI thing, like you said, or I'm sure there's loads of journaling exercises and things like that, that no, this is like a real person who actually is maybe like your
Yeah.
best friend
Yeah. Yeah.
and who you have a responsibility to care for and to put yourself in that place. What would future me want current day me to do
Yeah.
for them? What do they wish for me? And it might not always be, oh, I wish you would save all your money and da da da. Like it could also be like, God, I wish you relaxed more. Like it doesn't, this is not all financial. Like I could definitely
Yeah.
see my 65-year-old self be like, God, Rachel, like take a day off. I can definitely see that advice coming to me. So it's really beautiful. And it could be like, hey, I could have better maybe healthcare or get some more help at home if I had just paid a little more attention to my spending
Yeah.
or had applied for that raise or, like these little things we don't, in the moment have a bit of a butterfly effect, right? For us later
Well,
on
I,
in so many ways.
I think in the capacity piece, I think it's also very interesting that I look at that as okay, I want to have this capacity, and so there's a I'll just call it kind of an activity and exercise component that um, if I build up these habits, like every morning I get up and I do 5 minutes of exercises. I'm really religious about it. I do it every morning. And it's like, I want to build up these habits because I want to be able to walk around the block, 10 or 15 years from now. Um, and the best way to ensure that is and that's, my future self. And I want to see my future self. Um, and I actually do have this vision of what that should look like. Because now in at my age, now I notice and I associate with a lot of people that are walking with canes, that have had struggles, and other people that are, really making it happen.
It's what you do every day,
Yeah,
right? Not what you do
yeah,
every once in a while. It really is what you
yeah.
do every day. And with money, lifestyle, all of that stuff. So, John, I just thought of a question because a lot of the folks I work with are more of the millennial generation and their parents are boomers. And there's often some tough conflict. I think the generational differences between these two groups that you and I help,
Mm.
is really there and really real. And with you being kind of on the side of, the older generation who's looking at retirement or dealing with retirement, what dynamics do you see happening with their adult children? Like you had mentioned earlier, some of your clients feel like, oh, I really should help them with that house, or I really should,
Mm.
and that from your side, maybe you're like, well, let's think about that. What are you hearing on the parent side of you about what it's like for them to have adult children who have a really different financial reality than they did?
Mm. Let me think about that because right now I
Yeah.
have two clients where it's just the opposite, where I have the
Oh,
adult children who are trying
okay.
to help the parents. Um,
Yeah, me too. It's a
yeah,
tough
yeah,
arrangement, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've seen plenty of and personally experienced it. Yeah, there is absolutely no easy answer to that one. That's for sure. That I'll tell you, I had a couple situations where I was giving this a lot of thought from kind of a philosophical level, and this may be totally useless. But anyway, this is the way that I was trying to help people with this was um, that I said, let's think about this. Here, you're the secure 70-year-old, and here's your really struggling 30-year-old. Let's think about this in terms of rights and responsibilities.
Hmm.
Okay. That your 30-year-old, they have the absolute right, it's sort of like you know, four-cell matrix as far as you and them, rights and responsibilities. They have the absolute right to go and be an alcoholic or to decide they're not going to work. But where that they do not have the right to hand you that responsibility. Here's what your rights are. Your rights are to set boundaries. You have a responsibility. It is your child. You have a responsibility, but let's dial that responsibility in. It's not a blanket that you're taking care of everything. I have another client who admittedly it was really interesting that he and her husband, they had three kids, and they're now in their mid 60s. They were really devoted to their kids to the extent that it really impacted their ability to save, that they were sending their kids to private schools. They were paying for their kids to go to college. They put a bunch of money into buying a house for one of their kids, and they were in an interesting situation now where one's retired, one's still working part-time, but it's clear they may come into a windfall. But if they don't, it's clear that their financial situation is not dire, but they really need to think very carefully about how much they're spending, because they just don't have that much money.
When actually the responsibility will probably shift then to their kids to help them out down the line is the situation that's coming up.
Yeah, you would like to think so. But I was just really pushing, saying you've really got to have some boundaries. You really need the thing you need to work on are your boundaries. And I thought about what you just said, and I really wondered if the kids could ever make that shift. Don't know. I'm just theorizing that when you grow up in that kind of environment,
you never think you'd have to take care of mom and dad.
Mom and dad are always there for me. Turning that around, I think, is really, really challenging. That there is, I hate to use the word entitlement, but it just becomes how the relationship is structured.
Right.
And you can't incorporate it into your version of reality. Your parents have been taking care of you. You don't even know what it means to really try and take care of your parents.
And I live this firsthand, actually, John. I don't know if you know this about me. My mom lived with us for the last 5 years of her life, and she died in 2021. And it really, I literally brought home for me how expensive old age is.
Oh, yeah.
How drawn out it is. How, you can have all the intentions in the world. Oh, I'm going to travel when I retire, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But like you said, you're imagining that in the body you have, today as a 45-year-old, right? And, just what long-term care it costs, what the medical care costs, and even outside of medical care, like, my mom moved in with us because like she couldn't afford to like have people help her fix the house and take care of the house. Like it was just some basic stuff like that. And I think that was a surprise for her. And she also really wanted to hold on to a little pot of money to be able to have something for her grandchildren and her children, which was very generous. But I think if we were to back up, she really needed that for herself. And it also wasn't a substantial amount of money. And I think, it's like, I hate to be doom and gloom, but the number one priority is going to be yourself in retirement and old age. Like it really needs to. And and we have a funny culture about taking care of elders. My husband, who's Ukrainian, it is absolutely baked into the culture. You absolutely take care of your parents. That's one of the reasons we brought in my mom to our house. I wouldn't have really considered it. And it was my husband's push because he said, that's just what you do. But that's pretty unusual when we talk about most modern day American culture. But really most of the world lives multi-generationally in a way that we don't. So we're kind of the outliers in this way that like, oh, mom and dad, you're aging, you're on your own. That's not how other cultures go. And I feel like those conversations aren't really happening. And the boomers have always been hyper independent. And like, I don't know, John, how's it going to be for you to accept help to turn the table on you? Like, I mean, you're really living it right now. And I so appreciate like the philosophy and the way you're diving deep with this. Like, how is it for you
Right.
to be in this chapter of your life? And like you said, like your capacity is diminished. Might you need to receive help?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I have very close relationships with our two children. We just personally, we just went through for the last 3 years a situation with our daughter-in-law and her family where her parents needed a lot of help, and it was good in the sense that I felt like it established this. Yeah, this is what we're going to do, and
Boundaries, like
not
you said.
yeah, and it wasn't so much the kind of I'm staking a claim, okay, but more that yeah, we're going to take care of each other. We
Wow.
recognize that we're going to take care of each other, and we want to take care of each other. But I don't think that exists in every family, for
It
sure.
sounds like it started with right with bridging this conversation that actually, hey, we all really do want to talk about this. And back to the boundary conversation, we're actually talking about boundaries this month in the Money Healing Club. Boundaries is really more about what you are going to do. It's
Mm,
here's what I will do. Like, just like you said, here's what we're
yeah,
prepared to offer. And that everyone can calm down because we're not making assumptions. We're not guessing, things aren't, there isn't the gatekeeping, and it can be stretchy and it can be an uncomfortable conversation at first, but then once it's out, usually everyone benefits from that. That's
yeah.
very cool that your family could start that.
And I
Yeah.
have a couple different clients where that this has been initiated by the younger generation
Yeah.
to be because of the complexities when you're 30 or 40 years old, you've got a lot of history with your parents.
Mhm.
Because of those complexities, they have brought me in to be a third party, an outside third party who can just doesn't have the baggage on either side, that we're not pushing each other's buttons, that we're just trying to uh, have a factual, and as a financial therapist, this is why they don't bring in, with all due respect to the financial planning world, that why a financial therapist is better suited, because I am happy to work on the numbers, but I'm also listening very carefully for what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll just give you an example in this particular case with this older couple. That's exactly my job. Is okay. What's going to make sense, and what kind of additional support's going to be needed. But very quickly we got into, here was this event that happened several years ago. It's never been resolved, and for the mom, this has got to be resolved before we're really going to be able to go forward. I'm not
Mm.
doing really couples therapy in that sense. It's just going to be me working with her individually for a couple of sessions. But it's very clear that if we don't resolve this, it's going
Anyway.
to fail. It's just going to
Oof.
fail.
The stench of unfinished business. It just sits
Yeah.
there until we come in.
Yeah.
Right. And where it's like, it's not all about the money. We're like, there's a block there and it will put everything at a standstill until
Yeah.
we can work through it. And then things really get moving, which is like the cool part of therapy, right? This thing that has not been spoken about. It's been sitting like a turd on the doorstep. And then we finally deal with it. And then things can really get moving. Yeah.
I'll give you another example back to the previous couple that I was talking about. So I'm talking with this woman, and they had a very, really nice lifestyle, a lot of great things. But they had, in the year 2000, some things changed for them, where they moved from this mode of, yeah, we can, we're like really upper middle income and we can afford this stuff, and our kids are going to private school, to, you know, we can still afford it, but it's a stretch. And this woman she said, yeah, we've been doing this for 25 years. And she said, and I've known all along that a stretch. And some years it's been a big stretch. And really in the past 10 years, it's really come home to roost. Just I've never been able to talk to anybody about it for 25 years. I've never been able
Oof.
to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
It broke my heart. It just broke my heart. I was like,
Yeah. I mean, that's the sacred element, I think, of the work we do. Yeah, I hear that all the time. Now you're the only other person who knows this big money shame, right? And that's a role
yeah,
I take very, very seriously. Like, I think we really get how vulnerable this is and how, with all the stigma and taboo around money, how these things get locked in a box for so long. And it can be scary to open it up, but like, oof, when you find the right person to talk with and it's safe and it starts to open, incredible things start happening. It's really possible. If anyone listening, if you haven't talked with a financial therapist or really started that conversation, we know it's scary, but it's so possible, and really cool things can happen after that.
you just hit on something that I did want to come back to. And I think
Yeah.
that for the retiree people facing retirement, this whole issue of shame for the people that are feeling like they haven't done a good job. The whole issue of shame is just massive. And it is coupled then with these limitations, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I was a bricklayer, but I didn't save enough money, and that's what I know. That's who I am, and that's what I know how to do. And now I've got a bad back, and I really can't do this stuff, and I don't have enough money, but I can't. The thing that kept me afloat is no longer available to me. So
Yeah.
what's the best thing I can do? Go be a greeter at Walmart or something, and just all of the shame in that. And then back to what I was saying before then of dealing with your kids, this intergenerational piece where the parents are bringing in that kind of shame makes it just really a challenging situation, and really in a lot of cases really almost impossible without some outside help to get through that.
Yeah, especially with long-standing things that have been dealt with for many years, it really helps to have an outsider for sure. Yeah. Well, John, I want to ask you the question that I ask all my guests at the end
Okay.
of our interview. Okay, I want you to picture your money as a creature, real or imagined. What is the first thing that comes to mind? Don't overthink it. What do you
Okay.
get?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is money's my friend.
Money's my friend.
Money's
Mm-hmm.
I just as a large kind of cuddly friend.
Mm.
And I can only say that because I have been just extraordinarily fortunate in my life. And so it is, I haven't I'm not rich, but I'm, reasonably comfortable. And that attitude has served me well, I guess.
Yeah.
And I try to keep that going. That
Yeah.
money, I don't, I just I'm able to let it be my friend, and not everybody. I
Yeah.
gave you an example of my high net worth client.
Now, friends for everybody.
Money is a very large bucket of anxiety for him. For me,
Sometimes,
it's my
yeah.
friend.
And I think that's the healing power of being with someone like you, right? Because they can feel that friendliness when they're with you. That like John's really good friends with money, and then that helps soften the whole thing, right? That you're carrying that with you in the work that you do, and obviously in your whole life. I love that. I have a vision. I don't know. I have my own image of your friendly money. It's like a big bean bag. That's what I picture.
I actually use the word embrace
Mm.
with my clients. That I want you to embrace your finances. I want
Mhm.
because so many of them, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to look
Push
at this
away.
bank account statement.
Yeah. And I think you energetically being in an embrace with your own money, well, I'm sure it helps with that process. Well, that's wonderful, John. How do we stay in touch with you, and how do people find out about how to do some work with you?
Okay, so I have a website. It's www.financial-therapy.me.
Okay.
And my email is john@financial-therapy.me. And I've got a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about different aspects of financial therapy, and a Facebook page, and I'm on LinkedIn
Oh, that's
as well.
great. I will link all of that in the show notes. I can't wait to binge your stuff, John. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I just want to say to your future self, I think it sounds really good. And I love knowing you and your future self.
Yeah. Well, likewise, Rachel, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and it was great having this conversation today.
Thank you, John. Thanks for listening to the Money Healing Club podcast. You can find resources, links, everything from this episode in the show notes below or at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. Do you have a question or a topic about financial therapy or about just living in this life with money? I'd love to get your voicemail to be featured on a future episode of the podcast. Check it out at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. You'll see a big orange button there where you can record from any device you're on. You can also be anonymous. We are in this together, and I really appreciate it. See you next time.